My name is Maya Reed, and the story of my family is written in the timber and stone of a house on a lake. Osprey Point, our grandfather called it. It was a rambling, cedar-shingled cottage that had been in our family for 3 generations, a place where the scent of pine needles and wood smoke was the permanent air freshener, and the screen door's slam was the official soundtrack of summer. When our grandfather, William Reed, passed away, he left the house to the 3 of his grandchildren, my cousins, Ben and Josh Reed, and me, in 3 equal, indivisible shares. I wept when the will was read, not for the inheritance, but for the trust he had placed in us to be the custodians of his most cherished legacy. I was the only one who truly understood what that meant. Ben and Josh saw the house as a free vacation spot. I saw it as a sacred duty. The following spring, I poured my life savings, a sum I had diligently built for a down payment on a city apartment, into the house's aging bones. While Ben was too swamped with work, and Josh was in the middle of a big move, I was there every weekend, my hair caked with sawdust, my hands raw from work. I hired a crew to fix the leaky roof that had dripped water into the attic for years. I personally tore out the rotting planks of the deck, replacing them board by board. I spent weeks sanding and refinishing the original hardwood floors that had been hidden under a hideous 1970s carpet. I did it all with a joyful heart, fueled by the vision of a shared future, of our children, mine, Ben's, Josh's, all growing up together, their laughter echoing through the same halls that held our own childhood memories. The betrayal arrived with the first heat wave of summer. My cousins, with their wives and children, descended upon the newly renovated house not with gratitude, but with an unnerving air of ownership. The first sign of trouble was when Ben's wife, Sarah, complained about my house rules, which were simple requests to not let the kids draw on the newly painted walls. Josh then informed me that they'd be hosting a huge 4th of July party, without so much as asking. I was being treated as the on-site manager, the unpaid help. The confrontation happened on a Sunday morning, on the new deck I had built with my own hands. They sat me down, the 3 of them, Ben, Josh, and Sarah, a grim-faced tribunal. "Maya," Ben began, his voice laced with a rehearsed seriousness, "we've been talking and we've decided to make a change in how the house is managed. We took a vote." I stared at them, uncomprehending. "A vote?" "It's 2 against 1, Josh chimed in, with a shrug that was meant to convey casual regret. "We're the majority owners. We've decided it's best if we take over the primary scheduling. We've already changed the locks." The words hit me like a physical blow. Change the locks. "From now on," Ben continued, avoiding my eyes, "if you want to use the house, you can just book a time slot with us. A month's advance notice should be fine. We just need to coordinate. It's only fair." Devastated, I drove away from the house, the sound of their children's laughter a cruel mockery. As I turned off the long, private dirt road that led to the property, my tear-filled eyes fell upon the old, faded "for sale" sign hammered into a tree. It was for the large, undeveloped parcel of woodland that the access road cut through, the land that completely surrounded Osprey Point. And in that moment, the grief in my heart began to curdle into a cold, architectural rage. They saw me as the caretaker. They were about to learn they had fundamentally misunderstood the landscape. Back in my apartment, the quiet hum of the city was a jarring contrast to the chaos in my mind. The feeling of being an outsider in my own family home was a deep, septic wound. They had taken my work, my money, and my love, and had repaid it with an eviction notice disguised as a new management style. For a day, I wallowed in my grief. I scrolled through old photos of my grandfather and me on the dock, the shared dream now a bitter memory. But the architect in me, the part that sees problems not as obstacles but as design challenges, refused to let the anger fester. It began to build something new. I went online not to look for lawyers, but to the county assessor's website. I pulled up the parcel map for the area around the lake, and there it was, in stark, unforgiving lines. Osprey Point was a small, 2-acre island of property, a square cutout from a much larger 20-acre parcel. And that larger parcel, a swath of dense, old-growth forest, was a single, contiguous lot. Lot 7B, it included the entire half-mile stretch of dirt road that was the only way to get to the house from the main highway. And more importantly, it included the entire strip of shoreline, the 100 feet of sandy beach and rock outcroppings that ran directly in front of the house. The house itself had a dock, but the land the dock was attached to, land everyone used to swim, to launch canoes, to build bonfires. It all belonged to Lot 7B. The listing for the land was still active. The price was astronomical, far more than I could comfortably afford. It was a massive, terrifying gamble. But the plan that was forming in my mind was not just about revenge. It was about security. It was about creating a fortress of solitude, a permanent buffer against the carelessness and cruelty of my cousins. It was about taking back control. My first call was to a real estate lawyer, a sharp, methodical woman named Hannah Chen. I explained the inheritance, the betrayal, and the unique geographical situation. "They landlocked you emotionally," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "So you're planning to landlock them physically. It's poetic. And legally," she added after reviewing the maps, "it's perfect. Their property had legal access at the time of inheritance. The subsequent sale of a neighboring, privately owned parcel is not grounds for a court-ordered easement of necessity. They would have to prove you bought it with malicious intent, which is nearly impossible. They were simply poor stewards of their own interests. They should have bought this land themselves." The next few weeks were a blur of frantic, secret activity. I drained my investment accounts, cashed in my retirement savings, and met with bank loan officers, piecing together the financing for the land purchase. I was leveraging my entire financial future on this single, audacious move. There were moments of sheer terror, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced I was making a catastrophic mistake. But then I would picture Ben's smug, dismissive face as he talked about visitation rights, and the terror would solidify back into resolve. I closed on the 20-acre parcel on a quiet Thursday afternoon. My name, Maya Reed, was now on the deed for every tree, every rock, and every inch of dirt surrounding Osprey Point. My first act as a landowner was a phone call to a local fencing company. I ordered the installation of a heavy-duty 8-foot steel gate at the exact point where the private access road met the property line of my new land. The installation was scheduled for the following Friday, just in time for the long holiday weekend. My cousins, I knew, had planned another massive party. While I was quietly assembling my fortress, my cousins were living as kings in their conquered castle. Friends who had summer places on the other side of the lake would send me reluctant updates. Ben and Josh were treating Osprey Point like a fraternity house. There were loud parties, jet skis carving up the quiet cove, and a general air of disregard for the property I had so carefully restored. They had posted photos on social media. My cousins and their friends, beers in hand, lounging on the deck I had built, the caption reading, "Enjoying the fruits of our labor at the family lake house." The arrogance was galling. They truly believed they had won, that their 2-to-1 vote had been a clever and final resolution to the Maya problem. They saw my silence as acceptance, my absence as surrender. They had no idea I wasn't gone. I was just repositioning my pieces on the board. The week of the holiday weekend was a crescendo of anxiety and anticipation. The gate was installed on Friday morning. The company sent me a photo of the finished work, an imposing black steel gate stretching across the dirt road, a large, professionally printed sign affixed to it. It read, "Private property." Posted, "No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Reed Land Holdings, LLC." I had formed a simple LLC to purchase the land. A small legal shield Hannah had recommended to make the ownership seem more corporate and impersonal. The final piece of the plan was to ensure my cousins couldn't simply go around the gate. That afternoon, I hired a local surveyor to mark the property lines with bright orange tape, creating a clear, legally defined perimeter around my 20 acres. The narrow 2-acre plot of Osprey Point was now a perfect, inaccessible little box on the map. They were surrounded. The call came on Friday evening just as the sun was setting. It was an unknown number. I answered. It was a furious, sputtering Ben. "Maya, what the hell is this?" he shouted, his voice tinny and distorted. "There's a gate blocking the road. We can't get to the house. There are like 5 families in a convoy here." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice a placid sea of calm. "That road is on private property. There's no public access." "What are you talking about?" he yelled. "That's the road to our house." "No, Ben," I corrected him gently. "That's the road that crosses my land. The house is about a half-mile past my property line. You're welcome to park on the highway and walk, but I must advise you not to step on my property. You saw the signs." There was a beat of stunned, uncomprehending silence on the other end. "Your property," he stammered. I boo. "GHT the surrounding parcel, Ben," I explained. Lot 7B, all 20 acres of it, the road, the shoreline, all of it, it's mine. The silence that followed was longer this time. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, the dawning, horrific realization of what I had done. He wasn't just locked out for the weekend, he was locked out forever. You can't do that, he finally managed, his voice a mixture of rage and panic. Oh, Ben, I said, a cool smile in my voice. I assure you. I already have a great holiday weekend. I hung up the phone, the war was over, the siege had begun. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My cousins, faced with a car full of angry kids and a trunk full of melting ice, were forced to turn their convoy around, their grand party plans in ruins. The next week, I received a torrent of furious voicemails and a blistering email from Josh, calling me a snake, a traitor, and a host of other, less creative names. He informed me their lawyer would be in touch. Hannah Chen was not concerned. Let them rattle their sabers, she said calmly when I forwarded her the email. They have no case. They're just realizing the true cost of taking you for granted. They did sue, of course. They filed a motion for an emergency easement, claiming I had landlocked their property. The court hearing was a brief, almost comical affair. Their lawyer argued passionately about fairness and access. Hannah simply presented the official county survey map and the timeline of the transactions. Your Honor, she said, her voice dry as dust, my client's property, Lot 7B, was for sale on the open market. My client purchased it. The defendant's property, Lot 8, was not landlocked at the time they inherited it. It only became so because they failed to secure their own access by purchasing the surrounding land when it was available. Their lack of foresight is not my client's legal responsibility. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a deep respect for property law, took less than 10 minutes to dismiss their case. The survey lines were clear. My purchase was legal. Their problem was their own. They were not only defeated, they were now on the hook for their own substantial legal fees. The true impact of their new reality began to sink in. Their beloved party house was now a worthless, inaccessible cabin. They couldn't drive to it. They couldn't walk to the lake from it without trespassing on my land. Their property value, once robust, had plummeted overnight. It was a beautiful house on a hill with no way to get there and nothing to do once you arrived. The final, desperate call came from Josh. His tone was no longer furious but pleading. Maya, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. We need to work something out. We need an easement. Name your price. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, savoring the complete and total reversal of our positions. A few months ago, they were the majority owners dictating terms to me. Now they were beggars at my gate. I'm not interested in selling an easement, Josh, I said, my voice cool and businesslike. But I am willing to discuss a different kind of solution. Have your lawyer call mine. We can set up a meeting. The meeting took place in Hannah Chen's sterile, impersonal conference room. It was neutral territory, a place where emotion was secondary to negotiation. Ben and Josh sat across the long, polished table from me, their faces a mixture of resentment, desperation, and exhaustion. The arrogant, entitled men from the summer were gone, replaced by two men who had been thoroughly, comprehensively outmaneuvered. As you know, Hannah began, her voice crisp and formal, my client is not willing to grant an easement or right-of-way across her property. The privacy and seclusion of her land are of paramount importance. So what are we supposed to do? Ben burst out, his frustration boiling over. Just let the house rot. That is, of course, your prerogative, Hannah said without missing a beat. I decided it was time for me to speak. I do have an alternative proposal, I said, my voice calm and measured. I am willing to resolve this situation by purchasing your shares of the property. A flicker of hope appeared in their eyes. They thought I was offering them a lifeline, a way to cash out and escape the mess they had created. What's your offer? Josh asked, leaning forward. I pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a formal offer, drafted by Hannah. It contained a recent court-ordered appraisal of their 2/3 share of the house, an appraisal that took into account its current, landlocked status. The number was shockingly low. And my offer, I continued, is to purchase your combined shares for 50% of that appraised market value. The hope in their eyes died, replaced by a stunned, furious disbelief. 50%, Ben sputtered. That's robbery. The house is worth 10 times that. The who? See was worth that, I corrected him gently. It was worth that when it had a road and a lake. Now it's a cabin in the woods with no access. Your actions and your subsequent inaction determined its current value. I'm offering you a way to salvage something from a completely illiquid asset. It's a generous offer under the circumstances." They protested, they argued, they postured. But in the end, they had no choice. They were hemorrhaging money on a property they couldn't use, and my offer was the only one on the table. They had a mortgage to pay on their own homes, families to support. They couldn't afford a protracted, pointless war. They signed the papers. The house, all of it, was mine. Osprey Point, the legacy of my grandfather, the object of my love and labor, was finally, completely, and securely in my hands. The first thing I did as the sole owner of Osprey Point and the surrounding 20 acres was tear down the gate. It had served its purpose. I then spent a quiet, solitary weekend at the house, a process of reclamation and purification. I walked through the rooms, which were a mess, left in a state of disarray by my cousin's final, angry departure. I aired out the stale smell of beer and entitlement, and I began the slow, satisfying work of setting things right. I sat on the deck I had built, watching the sun set over the lake, the only sound the call of a loon and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. The quiet was absolute. The seclusion was perfect. I had my fortress. My victory was complete, but it was a lonely one. My cousins were now completely estranged from me, their bitterness a permanent, unbridgeable chasm between us. The dream I'd had of our children playing together on the dock was a ghost, a casualty of a war I had been forced to fight and win. The family my grandfather had hoped to unite with his legacy was now irrevocably broken. There was a profound sadness in that, a bittersweet tang to my triumph. But as I looked out at the pristine, undeveloped shoreline, at the dense woods that now belonged to me, I knew I had made the right choice. I had not just saved a house, I had saved a legacy. I had protected it from the carelessness of those who did not understand its value. I had ensured that for generations to come, at least one branch of the Reed family would have this sanctuary, this piece of heaven on earth. The legacy of peace and quiet I had secured had come at the cost of family unity. It was a steep price, but standing there, in the profound, beautiful silence of my own private kingdom, it felt like a price worth paying. I had lost 2 cousins, but I had saved my grandfather's soul, and that was a trade I could live with. The following summer, Osprey Point was a different place. It was no longer a battleground or a party house. It was a sanctuary, a place of peace. My own small family, my husband and our young daughter, filled the quiet rooms with a new kind of laughter, a gentle, joyful sound that seemed to heal the house's recent wounds. We planted a garden. We took the old canoe out at dawn. We taught our daughter to identify the constellations in the clear, dark sky. I was creating new memories, writing a new chapter for the house, one based on stewardship and love, not entitlement and conflict. I put the entire 20-acre parcel of land into a conservation trust, a legal move that would permanently protect it from any future development. No one would ever be able to build on the shoreline. No one could ever cut down the old-growth trees. The seclusion and natural beauty of the place were now guaranteed, forever. It was my final act of protection, my ultimate gift to the legacy I now solely controlled. My relationship with Ben and Josh never recovered. We saw each other only at the occasional, unavoidable family gathering, where we would exchange clipped, polite greetings and then retreat to opposite corners of the room. The bitterness had hardened into a permanent, icy distance. Their wives looked at me with a mixture of fear and resentment. I was the woman who had not just won, but had annihilated them. I felt no guilt. I had simply played the game they had started, and I had played it better. My victory had been a lesson in consequences, a lesson they had been unwilling and were now unable to learn. I had not just bought a house, I had bought peace of mind. I had bought the certainty that the legacy I cherished would be safe, and that was a purchase that was truly priceless. As my daughter grew, I told her the story of the house in a simplified, age-appropriate way. I taught her about our grandfather, about the importance of taking care of the things we love, and about the quiet strength that comes from standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. I wanted her to understand that the house was more than just a place. It was a responsibility. It was a story of family, in all its beauty and its brokenness. And now, it was her story to inherit. The solitude I had fought for was not a lonely one. It was a rich, fulfilling solitude, filled with the love of my own small family and the profound, peaceful presence of nature. I had created a buffer not just of land, but of intention around our lives. Osprey Point had been saved. Its legacy was secure. And in the quiet evenings on the deck, I often felt the presence of my grandfather, not as a haunting, but as a quiet, approving nod. I had understood the assignment. I had been a worthy custodian. My name is Maya Reed. I inherited a third of a house and a world of trouble. I was cast out by my own family, my love and labor taken for granted. So I bought the earth and sky around them, I bought the road to their door, and I bought the water's edge. And in the end, I used my power not for revenge, but for preservation. I saved a piece of our family's history from those who were unworthy of it, and in doing so, I created a new and better legacy for the generations to come. The house was finally, truly at peace, and so was I. The quiet of Osprey Point became a character in itself, a constant, soothing presence. My victory was not a noisy, gloating affair. It was as silent and deep as the lake at midnight. I had taken a situation of profound disrespect and had responded not with shouting, but with a quiet, strategic masterstroke that left no room for argument. It was a lesson I carried into all aspects of my life. The most powerful moves are often the ones made in silence, the ones no one sees coming. The financial risk I had taken paid off in ways I hadn't anticipated. As the years passed and the areas around the lake became more developed, my 20-acre sanctuary became an oasis of pristine wilderness. Its value, both monetary and ecological, soared. The gamble I had made out of anger and a need for protection had turned into the single wisest financial decision of my life. But its true value was never in the numbers. It was in the cry of the osprey circling overhead, in the rustle of leaves in the untouched forest, and in the profound, unshakable sense of peace that came with knowing it was all safe, all mine, all protected. The story became a quiet legend in our family, a cautionary tale about the difference between ownership and stewardship. Ben and Josh had claimed ownership, but they had failed in their duty of stewardship. I had been denied my ownership, so I had fought for the right to be the ultimate steward. And in the end, the land, the lake, and the house itself had rewarded me for it. I had not just acquired property, I had earned its trust. My daughter will grow up knowing that a legacy is not just something you are given. It is something you must actively protect, nurture, and sometimes fight for. She will understand that the deepest roots are not always the ones of blood, but the ones of love and dedication to a place that holds your heart. And that is a lesson far more valuable than any inheritance. In the end, I didn't just get the house. I got the quiet, the security, and the certainty that the legacy of Osprey Point was in the right hands. The cost had been high, but the peace was priceless. I had traded 2 cousins for a kingdom of solitude, and it was the best deal I ever made.